Hey, it's Jennifer again. You get 2 in 1 day, all very exciting. Fortunate you, because my trip to Sassy was canceled, which was a bummer for me, but now you get another video from me. It's gonna be great. I was rewatching my first video a few days ago and realized that I sounded like I was talking strangely. But anyways, hopefully I'm speaking more normally now. But I also realized that I had said that I would do a snippet on legal foundations for procurement, and realized I hadn't done that. And that actually is extremely important. What makes a legally binding contract? And the reason that's so extremely important is because, and I've said this many times to people, we don't write contracts for when everybody does what they're supposed to do. Because if everybody did what they were supposed to do, then you would never need anything in writing. We write contracts for that wretched day when somebody realizes, whoa, the other party didn't do what they were supposed to do, and so suddenly you whip open that contract and you hope there's something in there that can enforce the other party behaving in the way that you hope that they would. And that goes both ways. It's not always the government, and sometimes the government's not behaving the way it's supposed to. So that's why it's very critical to know what constitutes a legally binding contract in the United States of America and many other places in the world. Well, there's 5 critical things. The first thing is you have to have offer and then acceptance of an offer. Now, how this happens in the commercial arena can be quite, well, was this really an offer? Is a newspaper ad an offer? And then going and buying it, does that constitute acceptance of an offer? Again, commercial world, it's not very clear. In the government world, it's actually much more clear. Depending on what part of the FAR you're working in, the government sometimes is making the offer. That would be FAR Part 13. And then 14 and 15, the government actually, we request contractors to make an offer to us. That's why you have this request for proposal or request for a bid. So RFB and RFP. Or IFB, invitation for bid, sorry, not request. So you've got these things going on. Someone makes an offer and then someone must in fact accept that offer. The way that acceptance happens can be sometimes by performance. When you're dealing with the simplified acquisition side of the house, the government goes out with the offer, which is a purchase order or a call order under BPA. And then the contractors then actually have to sign their signature and send it back in to indicate that they've accepted that offer, but they must in fact perform, indicating that they've accepted it. Again, there could be a whole segment on offer and acceptance under simplified acquisition, because what if the contractor doesn't perform, and does that mean they haven't accepted it, and blah, 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 blah. So it gets quite elaborate, but this is just on the legal bit. So, 1. Offer and acceptance. Number 2, consideration. What is consideration? Consideration in our legal system is anything of value. It most commonly takes the form of money, which most people value money. But again, keep in mind, money is valued for what it gets you, and so there's other things of value. So, for instance, I could say to my friend, hey, I'll give you this fabulous camera of mine that I use to make these little snippets if you give me a ride to Rome, or something of that sort. So there's something of value. I'm giving my camera away and I'm getting a ride to Rome in return. So that's an example of where no money changes hands, but there's something of value that's being exchanged on both parties. Sometimes a promise can actually be something of value, and this becomes important when we get into various contract modifications where new work is occurring or the contract is substantially changing. There still has to be that element of consideration for, in fact, a modification to a contract to be legally binding. So we've got 2 of our things now: offer and acceptance and consideration. What's number 3? Number 3 is specificity of terms, or clarity of terms, whatever you want to read. There has to be very clear understanding between the parties as to, what's actually being agreed to. So obviously most of the time this is accomplished by, in the federal government, it's accomplished by a very lengthy list of terms and conditions, a very specific description of the work that's being asked to be performed, a statement of work, or a very clear list of the items or supplies that are being asked to be delivered. So it's very, very clear what's going on. If it's not clear enough, then in fact the contract could be held to be not binding because it was just too ambiguous to ascertain whether there was actually any kind of agreement or something going on. So now we're to number 3. We've got offer and acceptance, sometimes also called mutual assent. So mutual assent / offer / acceptance, consideration, and then specificity of terms. And then number 4 is capacity of the parties. Both parties have to be capable of making an agreement. This is, again, in the United States, you can't have a legally binding contract with a 6-year-old. You can't take them to court because they failed to, clean their room as you contracted with them that they would. Or, and we actually see this more commonly, sometimes telemarketers or various unethical service people will actually prey on the elderly because they know that unfortunately, elderly people, when they become elderly, start to perhaps not be as clear in their minds as they were at one point in time. And as a result, it's relatively easy for these people to take advantage of them and to get them to sign various contracts or agreements that essentially siphon off their entire savings or things of that sort. And that we actually see that fairly commonly, where then it will be contested, when somebody finds out that this elderly person has been taken advantage of, and then they'll take them to court, the other party to the agreement to court, and indicate that it's not a legally binding agreement because the elderly person was not, in fact, didn't have the capacity, the mental capacity, sufficient mental capacity to make that particular contract. So capacity of the parties is very important. So once again, mutual acceptance, which is mutual assent, which is offer and acceptance, consideration, something of value. 3, specificity of terms. It has to be very clear what you're getting. Number 4 is capacity of the parties. Both parties must in fact be capable of making the agreement. That leaves number 5, my little pinky, number 5, which is it has to be otherwise legal. So sometimes I would be in California when I would be talking about this particular element, and I would say you cannot take someone to court in the United States of America for failing to run drugs across the border. Even if you have offer and acceptance, consideration, specificity of terms, and capacity of the parties, no federal court, no court in the United States of America is going to say, oh, well, you have to run the drugs across the border because you signed this contract. Why? Because it's not otherwise legal. So in other words, a contract has to in fact comply with all of the other laws and regulations and things going on in the United States of America or the various state where you reside. So very, very critical to understand this. There has to be, again, 5 critical elements for a contract to be legally binding. And this, again, can get somewhat knotty, as in K-N-O-T-T-Y, intertwined or elaborate depending on the situation. Is it a modification? What if there's an option? Can you have an option to a purchase order because the person didn't accept it? There's some questions that arise from this. So it's, again, critical to understand this. So one last recap, let's go over them. 5 elements for a contract to be critically binding. Number 1, there has to be mutual assent, offer and acceptance going on. Number 2, there has to be consideration, something of value exchanged between the 2 parties. Number 3, specificity of terms. That means, again, that there has to be very clear description and definition of what actually is expected of both parties to the agreement. Number 4, capacity of the parties. The parties have to be mentally capable and understand what they are in fact doing when they make that agreement for it to be legally binding. And then number 5 is it has to be otherwise legal, meaning it is in fact legal. So there you have, I guess about a year in the coming, the little snippet on on the legal underpinnings of any contract. Again, any contract in the United States of America has to have those 5 things. So there you go, and happy Easter, or Buona Pasqua, as they say here in Italy. Hope you're all doing well and having a great day.